quieting down. And what we want to talk to you about this evening is how to make that silence really work for you, how to use that silence, but not only because it is useful in the sense that it allows you to be attentive and turn inward from outward, but because it is very, very effective. And so we'll take a look at all the ways you might make full use of the inner you so that you can have that maximum impact on your outer world, because that's where it all begins. As I was thinking about this topic, a very well-known song came to mind. The title is Silence. Silence is golden. Actually, that is only half the quote. The full line reads that words are silver, but silence is golden. And so we tend to be mostly extroverted, and that's understandable because we live in a world of action, and we live in a world where everything is visible and you make sense of it based on what you see. But the line from, and in fact, this is not a new proverb. It comes, I think it goes all the way back to the 10th or the 11th century. And it was only in the early 19th century, I think early 1901 or something like that, this essayist, Thomas Carlyle, put it in writing. And it would be a good thing to look at all of the proverbs, all of what has been written about the power of silence and why it is so important and essential that we understand the role that plays. But for our purposes, we want to have a more intimate relationship and understanding of what that has to do with each and every one of us. Because we come into sound from silence. So silence is who we are. And that silence is what gives rise to all of the sound and all of the action and all of the activity. And so what we're inviting you to do tonight is to go there and have an intimate connection, have an intimate conversation, if you will, with that special being that is always silent and always there. Before we go further, though, I want to have you consider a question that if you've had any psychology, I remember this comes to me from my freshman days, which was a long time ago. And you might have had the same question in your introduction to psychology classes. But I want to pose that question to you right now and see what comes to mind and hear what your thoughts are on it. And it will serve as a very important backdrop for where we're going with this conversation this evening. So the question that you usually get when you start that particular class, I remember it very well. And so here's the question. The question is, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? So let me repeat the question again, because I want to hear from you. If a tree falls in the forest and there is no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? What answer would you give to that question? I know there's one brave soul out there that's going to get us going with this. So who's it going to be?
Hi, it's Joanne.
I recognize some names out there, but I'm not gonna call on anyone.
So this is Joanne, and I would say yes, even though no one's there to hear it, it would still make a noise, a sound.
So your answer is that
Yes.
whether someone is there or not, it still makes a sound. Okay.
Yes.
And anything further you want to say about that as to why? Not that you have to. I just wanted to explore that further with you. Anyway, in any case, any other perspectives on that? Actually, it's really it's not a trick question. It's very, very
Om Shanti, brother.
uh-huh.
I guess the process or mechanism of falling a tree is there. It's going to make sound. It doesn't matter somebody's around there to hear or not, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect.
So you're saying it doesn't matter if it's heard.
Uh-huh. It's going to make a sound whether somebody hears or not.
Okay. Any others?
Yes, I also agree. Regardless if there is a witness, the sound would be heard by the surrounding nature.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be birds or whatever is there in nature is still receptive to it, even if it's not a human being.
Mhm.
So I'm in agreement.
Okay. All right. So I will return to the question at the end of the session, and I'll let you know. I'll let you know what my perspective is, and as well, I will expect that maybe you may want to expand on what you've already said based on what we take a look at, or you might even change what you said. But in any case, we will come back to the question before we conclude. But what I'd like to do now is to have you begin to access this special space. Because as I mentioned earlier, we come into sound from silence. So before we are any other form of expression or any expression at all, there is this silence. So let's go there and see what your experience of it is. And so in going into silence, which is what I'm inviting you to do right now, I don't mean that you should think of it as being quiet. Okay? Because this silence we're exploring is not the absence of sound necessarily. It's a particular environment that you have access to. It is the subtle you. It is the place from which you emerge. And in fact, what I would say is that before there was anything else, all there was is, or all there is silence. You know, there are at least 2 or 3 different books that I can think of that start out with the words "in the beginning." And so I want you to think of it in this way: in the beginning. And that means not only your own beginning, but everything you are interacting with, everything you have a relationship with. In the beginning, there was silence. So I want you to take yourself there. I want you to go inward and find that quiet place, that quiet space. And hold your attention and awareness there. And begin to appreciate the reverence of it, which is not something that you're unfamiliar with. Even in our outer world, when we honor a particular event or particular person or situation or circumstance, we are asked to be silent. And you might want to, in our conversation tonight, if you haven't already, think of why that is so. What is honorable about silence? And by extension, what is dishonorable about noise? And so it's not, you're juxtaposing, I would say, the familiar, which is the physical, the external, with the internal, the spiritual. This is to put you in touch with your own source, your own power, which you're able to experience in deep silence. Even in a crowd, you have access to that. And so go there and hold that space. And give no meaning, withhold any meaning from any experience you're having while you're there. Just be in silence. Think of it as your incubator. There's nothing there but you. And you are motionless. You are soundless. You are sightless. You are inert. You are just a point. You just exist. The seed that embodies all that you are. Unmanifest and silent. Shanti. So, what was your experience of that? Anything in particular that became evident or that you became aware of? Anything at all that may have had you experience? Yeah, go ahead. I can't see your name very well, but I can see your hand. You can go ahead. Just unmute your mic and
Go ahead, Aya.
okay. So at any time you can unmute your mic and ask a question or make a comment. But if we go to the description of what we're doing in this session, and I'll read the entire short paragraph. It says, after the holiday noise, listen to your inner voice. As the whirlwind of holiday activities quiets, an opportunity arises to reconnect with this stillness within. And so what we're exploring is the power of your inner voice, your intuitive guide that often gets drowned out by the busyness of life. And so, if that is going to happen, if you're going to discover your inner voice, you'll hear it where you just went. You'll hear it there. That's the silent sound that you want to hear. And when you cultivate the habit of daily introspection, daily meditation, you can hear that voice any day, every day. But of course, it's not, this might sound almost like an oxymoron, but it's a soundless voice, isn't it? You hear it, and only you hear it. And of course, when you do, there is that certainty about it. You don't have any doubts about what you're hearing, because you're going to where there is truth and only truth. And so the world that we live in is a very noisy world, isn't it? In fact, the more noise there is, the more it tends to, in other words, the loudest sounds tend to get our attention. And so all around us, the effort is to have you be extroverted. It's totally the opposite of what nurtures the inner being. You want to say something, Jose? Go ahead.
Hi, Aya. If you are ready to share, you can do so now.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As I was in the silence, I was thinking how a child, as it is being nurtured in the womb of the mother, it is in 9 months of silence. And the sound of the child is a cry.
Mm-hmm.
But for 9 months, we all were in silence, or in some cases, if a child was born earlier, the child was in silence. And when we tend to panic, it's because we're not being in a state of silence. If someone is accused of a crime, they are told, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say or do can and will be used against you.
Yeah.
So in many cases, when we don't use silence, silence is a superpower that we've all been granted. And by being able to recognize and tap into remaining silent, things cannot be used against us because we're not panicking.
Mhm.
This is part of our divine being, because when our loved ones pass on, we no longer hear their voice. There is a silence. And we're commanded, if you tend to believe, be still and know.
Indeed. Indeed. You know, as I said earlier, there's lots of proverbs about silence. There's limitless, and there's a reason for that. And as you were talking, one came to mind, and it says that better to remain silent and thought a fool than not to do so, and in other words, speak and remove all doubt. And so, as you were giving what you were told in a situation of the legal situation, you get the benefit of the doubt by remaining silent. And for our purposes this evening, what should happen as you move forward and begin to have this deeper relationship with the inner you, it comes with the confidence that you get from becoming intimate with yourself. And this is what is meant when we say we are enjoying ourselves. It's not something external, even though that's how it's understood and that's how it's used. But you are enjoying who you are because you come to know who you are from continuing to go there whence you came. And I like that you think of it as a womb. And of course, the silence is equated with darkness as well. And as I was looking at what I wanted to bring to the conversation, and in fact, in our lesson today, a lot was mentioned with regard to how bees function, and if you know anything about bees, and it doesn't matter that you may not, but bees will not work except in darkness. And thought will not work except in silence. Thought will not work except in silence. And this is why I wanted to take you there so that you can begin to appreciate that space that you have moved away from since birth, and not just birth in the current reality, but you're very, in fact, everything that we are experiencing externally silence gives birth to all of that. That is what we might call the universal womb. It is silent and dark, because remember, you are sightless as well, as soundless and motionless. And that's the space within that you have access to with meditation. There may be other ways to get there. I don't know of any, but I know about how well what we are doing here works to get you there. And it is that silence, that ever vibrant, vibratory space of all that you can ever need or do or become. That is the, you might say, the cradle of existence. And by existence, all that exists is birthed in silence. And we drown that out with noise. And this is why our entertainment is noisy, our celebrations are noisy. There was an interesting piece I brought with me from this poet on the subject. And I'll read a section of it to you. And its poem is In Search of Heroes. It says, break out the yellow ribbons, light up the Capitol dome, bring on the marching bands. Our heroes have come home. With the all too familiar bands on parade, we welcome home our heroes made. The nation smiles, we're oh so glad. It's time to rally round the flag. Where are all the heroes real? Long time passing. We must now instead conceal what is sorely lacking. Can we expect to fill this void with trivial pursuits, ribbons, and noise? Are our lives so naive and trifling that we'll substitute anything for real meaning? And so we've substituted everything that is, we've substituted the illusion for reality. And so that extends to everything that would be defined as real. And so we find it very difficult, if not impossible, to discern reality from illusion, fact from fiction, truth from falsehood. And so where we, as this spiritual community, is directing you every day is to discover, rediscover that power that allows you to be clear on what's real. And what's real never ceases. What's real is always real. And that includes you, by the way. You can't cease because you are real. And when you have that understanding, and more importantly, when you are able to have ready access to it, which you do by simply shutting off the outside at will, then your intuitive guide won't ever get drowned out by the busyness of life. In fact, you'll be in charge. You will be at cause. You may have been told why we refer to this as Raja Yoga, because it's royal, it's kingly, but most important of all, it gives you self-sovereignty, where you manage the self. You are aware of the self, or more importantly, you are aware of you as self. So you're able to manage that. And of course, you get free of all of the doubts because the questions are answered. Most of the doubt, most of the uncertainty, most of the fear, and especially the ignorance comes from not knowing who you are. And this is why what we focus on in this space is that very first question. Who are you? You're not the reflection in the mirror. You're the seer, not the seen. You are, right now, you are the listener, not the sound. You are the experiencer, not the experience. And so you can't arrive at that objective relationship with the world you're living in without going inward and getting all of those questions answered. And there are essential. Who are you? Where do you come from? What are you doing here and why? Where are you going? And how do you get there? Wouldn't you like to know the answers to all those questions? You do have them, but where we went earlier in the very start of our session was where you go to find that. And of course, we have a whole series of classes and courses that help you to do that. The classes are just the guides, though. You have to do the mining. You have to get underneath. You first, however, as I expect most of you already are, have to be seeking those answers. And when you get those answers, you will know that they are the right answers. Because you can't be in search of something that you're not familiar with, because if you are not familiar with it, then you wouldn't know when you found it. So you've known joy, you've known peace, you've known truth and purity and beauty. And that is where the search is. And once found, you are whole and complete again. Such that no amount of noise will be distracting enough that you ever want to rely on those sources for your satisfaction, because they're all temporal and inconsistent with the eternal you. And so you can move yourself away from the outside noise, but you still have to quell the noise within and go to that quiet space. Because remember, everything that's making itself manifest without already has a home within. And that's what has to be disrupted. So what for you, well, what are you hearing so far? Not that we have that much time left, but I'm interested in, and I won't forget that I have to get back to that question we asked at the beginning. But anyone wants to say anything?
I would like to say something.
Wonderful.
Can you hear me? It occurred to me that it seems like it's something simple that any of us can do. We all have the ability to go within,
Right.
but you know, most of us have lived, who knows, 20, 30, 40, 50 years older, you know, doing it the wrong way for so long
Mhm.
that something simple can be more complicated than we would imagine, because you've been so busy making this a habit. It's been a routine for just so long. How do you just switch the button and do this one simple thing? You've formed some logic out of doing it the wrong way, you know, like someone pisses you off, you know, you're trying to catch the bus and you miss it by a second or something, you know,
Yeah.
and you walk around pissed off, mad, you're cold, standing out there in the city, and all that emotion you're holding on,
Yeah.
when in fact those are the moments when you really do need to go within. That's when you need to slip in.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm hearing. I don't know, but that was what I gathered.
Yes,
Was
indeed. Yes, indeed. Because these practices we're talking about, as you rightly mentioned, um, I would say they're relatively easy in the quiet and solitude of your own home, and even there, you have the internal noise to deal with. But the real work is when you are out in the world. And yes, it's not as simple as pressing a button, but every effort that you make in the other direction gets you, remember, you are uncovering the real you. You're not discovering someone or something new. You're trying to remove all that's in the way of you being your true self. And yes, you have over time that has become polluted, just like our world has become that. The outer world is the same as the inner world. That has become polluted. And so this inward journey is taken one step at a time. But the first step, I expect we may have accomplished here, and that is the awareness. Because when you are, for every action that you take, there is a belief system that informs that action. And so it would be a very different set of choices that you would begin to make if you, let me put it this way, where the choices that we're making right now, the underpinning of that, the belief system, for the most part, is that we only have one life to live. And you can see, if I only have one life to live is the system that underpins the actions that I am taking, you can see what kinds of actions those will be. But what if your belief system was different, that was not so? And you can look at all of the actions that inform your life right now. And this might be a good place to start for the new year and see what systems of belief underlie that and subject them to examination, subject them to question. Our belief systems are very strong, and it's that you have to change. You believe that you're male, so it informs your actions. You believe that you're female. You believe that you're black. You believe that you are white. You believe that you are American. That informs your actions. But that space you went to, you're none of those things. So you want to keep going there and discover the truth, the real you. And what this session calls for I'm not saying that it's going to be as easy as pressing a button, but you will be able to have no uncertainty about the question I asked earlier, which is, where are you going and how do you get there? You'll be able to answer those two questions as well. Well, we have used up our time, unfortunately. But I want to get back to the question that I asked you earlier, which is, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? The question is, who determines if it makes a sound? So what you want to understand is that you are one entity, and the tree falling is another entity. And it is you that connects those two. In fact, everything that you are dealing with, the work, the family, the people, the politics, the everything in your world has no meaning unless, except the meaning you give it. This whole drama, as we call it, is your domain. You get to decide what it means. And if you don't, it's just a tree falling. Well, you get to say whether it makes a sound or not. So I want you to see the power in that perspective. There's nothing going on here that is not under, or which ought not be, which unfortunately it is, which ought not be under your control. Because you get to decide what it means, or if it means anything. There's no meaning without you. There's no drama without you. There's no world without you. The whole thing is designed about and for you. It's your creation as well. You're creating it moment by moment. And I always keep reminding us that this world life is not happening to us. We're making life happen. And so this is about putting yourself a cause or remembering that you are a cause. And when you remember that, then you decide what the outcome is going to be. And you start using this inner wisdom, your intuitive guide, as the flyer says, will not get drowned out by the busyness of life. And so what I just would want to say in conclusion, there is no sound. You give sound rise, not the falling tree. Falling tree doesn't give sound rise, you do. And in fact, you give everything rise, including your own feelings. And so that's the power that you want to begin to make manifest. And when that happens, we'll have the world that we want. So I'll have to, or maybe I should say to be continued. Maybe we'll have, maybe we'll have part 2 later in the year. But I thank you very much for taking the time out this evening to have this conversation. And don't stop. And if you haven't come to this space, you should make sure you do that in 2025. And let's make the world a better place. So, Om Shanti. Happy New Year.